Hello. Okay, hopefully it's not too much clickbait for you that I'm only going to talk about St. Elmo's Fire very briefly here. And in fact, I have to do a follow up to Dead Poets Society one of these days if I want to talk about Knox Overstreet's character arc more. Excuse me. But hardly anybody's watched that video, or nobody, I don't know. St. Elmo's Fire, I'm bringing it up thematically because it's about, the character wants to be a journalist, right? He's not the only main character. Judd Nelson wants to be a politician and yada, yada, yada. Emilio is supposedly going to law school till he decides he's going to go to med school. The big problem with that, movie is, I guess all the guys are obsessive weirdos except for the druggy man slut dog guy, but he's still in love with the chubby girl and wants to sleep with her and maybe throw her away like every other girl. I don't know. Poor Wendy. Like I said, not important, not going into that. The main character, or second main character, Andrew McCarthy, Kevin Dolans, wants to be a journalist, but his first byline, if you ever paused it and tried to read it, it's just like an op-ed comedy bit piece. So I don't know if he doesn't understand journalism, or, at his school they didn't teach very good journalism in Georgetown, or maybe that newspaper just doesn't understand journalism, or maybe they just, thought it would be funny to put a thing. Basically, all it says is, stock up on Pop-Tarts and Doors albums for when the apocalypse comes. That's, the gist of it. Which, of course, he's complaining about writing obituaries all the time, but his big breakthrough isn't some serious political hit piece or, something about a local scandal or tragedy or anything. It's just this creative writing outtake, I guess. I don't know. So that kind of segues. There was other movies throughout the decades about, working at newspapers and such. But broadcast news is more about not necessarily the journalists. Holly Hunter is kind of the editor producer, and so she writes some copy. And Albert Brooks wants to be a newscaster, but he is basically a copywriter by default. He's not an on-screen personality. If you've seen the film, it's probably the funniest scene in the film. Technically, I don't, spoiler alert, this whole thing is spoilers, right? So, yeah. If you haven't seen the film, you might want to watch it first, is kind of my typical disclaimer. But broadcast news has 3 main characters instead of 6 or 7. Okay, so if you don't know, the main character is Holly Hunter. The second main character is her love interest, William Hurt. And then the third main character is Albert Brooks, her longtime friend who has a crush on her. And so it shows all 3 of them at first in the intro, but it's really kind of her movie still, I would argue, because she's in the middle of the triangle, even though it's more of a love circle than a triangle. I mean, she almost reciprocates with Albert, but she never really seems romantically interested in him or physically attracted to him. It's kind of like they spend a lot of time together. They get along really well. So he automatically thinks they're in love, I guess, more than it's a triangle. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. Excuse me. I'm not exactly sure what constitutes a true love triangle. Anyway, it seems like it's just where they all only have feelings for the wrong person. And it's hard to tell with William Hurt's character if he's pretending to have feelings for her or if he wants to have real feelings for her and not just like her because she's cute. But at the same time, she just kind of wants him because he's a hunk, because Albert has the brain. So it's almost the Cyrano thing where she, desires the full package, best of both worlds. But apparently that, in Hollywood, that doesn't exist. Hollywood wants us to know for sure that there are smart, pretty women like her, but there's just so few decent men to go around. How can a girl choose? But the main crux of the so I'm usually not as interested in the love story aspect as in a movie like this as the career aspect of a movie like this. So to me, identifying the problem with their love lives isn't really the hole in the plot. I mean, like I said, some of that could be straightened out maybe better, but my issue with the film now is how like the liberals like her have either fallen by the wayside or turned into basically what we used to call yellow journalists because they're on a political crusade instead of, trying to present unbiased news. And so in the story, they're all mad at William Hurt because they say he's unethical because he does this shock value, entertainment value stuff, and he's editorializing when he should be, not opining or whatever, like the Andrew McCarthy bit where he finally gets his big piece and all it is just him blabbing his, fun personal take on how to live life or whatever. Now, my old journalism teacher was staunchly against all of this, and she would go on and on and on about ethics and credibility. I mean, it was like having a less attractive version of Holly Hunter, literally teaching print journalism. And I'm sure she had seen this movie a bunch of times, and I'll be talking about The Paper in a minute. Just spoiler alert on that one if you haven't seen that movie that came out a little later in the 90s, I believe. But William Hurt, at the end, I think he might be running for political office. I'm not sure, but he doesn't come off as overtly political. I don't know if he's supposed to represent conservatism to the liberal. But we don't know anything about his politics. He doesn't put politics into his newscasts. It's just that, he's sleazy because he's good looking with no ethics. But he even says in the beginning, he doesn't know anything about this stuff. That's why he wants to pal around with Albert Brooks and pick her brain and learn, because he admits he came over from sports and he doesn't really understand why he keeps getting promoted when everybody else gets fired, And side note, like sports commentators are the worst. This has been pointed out by many people. They always say stupid things. Like just even last night in baseball, they always say they're down to their last strike. It's like, well, or down to their last out or something like that. And it's like, well, that's not really actually true, because if the guy at bat gets a hit, then the next guy gets more strikes. So he's down to his last strike, but the team is not down to their last strike, because one run and they're right back in the game. And they usually get lucky because he hits a pop fly straight into a glove and the game ends, but it's still almost a lie more than a mistake, And so the sports guys get away with saying like erroneous things all the time, and there's like 50 tangents I'm leaving out because this video's already running long. And so again, I have 50 examples of modern journalism that I don't even want to go into. I wonder if Hollywood Hunter would be able to reprise her role, how that movie would play out now, how college journalism differed from high school journalism, all these kind of things. But the reason I bring up The Paper, because that's an even better example of the struggle, if you will. Randy Quaid is he's the photographer. He's been assigned to Michael Keaton's story, and Michael Keaton's running around trying to prove that the headline that the paper wants to run is wrong about these people who've been arrested for a crime they didn't commit or whatever. It's always some big, Hollywood thing. It's never just a regular story, man bites dog. And Glenn Close plays the editor-in-chief or whatever, and she's trying to stop them because she wants the paper to run on time and not lose money, because you have to print by a certain deadline or you lose a bunch of money. and they're trying to stop her, and they get in a big brawl, and Michael Keaton just finally leaves disgusted. And she turns to Randy Quaid, who's kind of the bumbling sidekick who, for some reason, has the best line in the whole movie. And she says, why are you helping him? Why are you defending him when all he's doing is getting in the way of progress or whatever? This is a business. We have to run the business. And he says, well, because this paper, and I think it's supposed to be a jab at the New York Post. He says, this paper's always run silly, dumb stories, and it's fine. In most papers, they run a correction on page 22 or whatever, when they get it wrong. But in all the years that we've been in, print, or all the years I've worked here or whatever, we never intentionally published the wrong headline knowing it was wrong. And so that's where, your modern ethics and whatnot comes in, because we get a lot of journalism now that's not just opinion, but knowingly erroneous, and they bury that correction, on purpose just to push their political slant. And like this isn't meant to be a political video at all. I put the picture of Ronald Reagan, just clickbait. There's not really nothing about politics. So in even broadcast news, even though they're supposed to cover Washington D.C. That was one kind of weird thing about the movie, is actually they didn't really delve into politics that much because they wanted to make this other broader point. And that's fine with me, because again, I think that broader point is what has been lost since that movie came out 30 something years ago.